Alright, real talk. Between you and me, there's a practice habit that you probably slipped into without even realizing it, and it's holding your playing back. But once you figure it out, it's so simple to fix, so let's just talk about it and let me show you what I mean. Welcome back. Today I want to help you fix a practice habit that almost every musician learns at some point, but every professional musician has to unlearn. And what is that practice habit? Playing chunks of music that are just way too big. So when you're not totally sure what to practice, it's so easy to default to running long sections of your music that sometimes you even start to loop the whole piece and you think, if I repeat this enough times, then muscle memory will eventually have to kick in, right? But here's the thing. Long excerpts give your brain just way too much information to process, and so you end up getting all of the repetition, but you don't get any of the real improvement, and that's why your playing can feel stuck, even when you're practicing every single day. Alright, so what's the solution? Well, I call it micro chunking, which I know it's a weird name, I don't like it either, it sounds gross, but it's the only thing I could think of that kind of accurately describes the premise, which is instead of practicing entire minute or entire excerpts of your piece, you're gonna switch to tiny, focused 5 to 10 second chunks of your music that your brain can actually absorb. And so let me show you what I mean using Villalobos Étude No. 1. So that little passage you just heard is going to become your chunk number 1. And inside that chunk, we are going to zoom in even further. And so we're going to look at just the right hand first. So I want you to mute the guitar with your left hand because I don't want the actual sound of the strings bothering our brain while it's trying to process the information we're about to teach it. And so we're going to slowly look at the arpeggio that Villalobos has laid out for us. So in this case, you have P, I, P, I, P, M, I, A, M, A, I, M, P, I, P, I, P. And then once you have that, you are going to slowly repeat that with the strings still muted over and over again for at least 3 minutes. I would say 3 to 5 minutes, because what you're going to do is you're going to allow yourself to live in that moment and allow your right hand to truly process this information you're trying to teach it. And so we're just going to repeat this super slowly for a few minutes, focusing on just that. Notice how, because we can't hear the strings vibrating, we can hear every single sound that we're making. And you can hear if you pluck a wrong string, if one of your fingers is slightly faster than the others, and you can really hone in on these little details because you're focusing on just one thing. And once you have that, then that's when we can begin to start looking at the left hand. We're not going to speed anything up yet. We're going to move to the next part of our chunk. We're going to look at the left hand. And so what we're going to do is look at the 2 chords that are in that chunk that we analyzed. So at first you start with E minor, and then Villalobos moves to an F sharp minor 7 chord, or F sharp diminished 7 chord. What we're going to do, we're not going to play the arpeggio, we're just going to practice transitioning between E minor and F sharp diminished. So you're going to play that E minor chord, you're just going to strum it, just so you can hear that everything's vibrating, and then you're going to transition to F sharp diminished. Strum that too. And then you're going to go back. And you're going to repeat this same thing, 3 to 5 minutes, just strumming. Then you're going to apply your right hand arpeggio to the left hand transition. And so you're going to get that E minor chord, which we've now built that muscle memory for. And you're going to start playing the arpeggio. And then you're going to transition. And that transition should feel significantly easier now that your left hand has taken the time to process the information. If it doesn't, or if you're struggling with that left hand transition, a quick tip you could do is you can actually hold that F sharp diminished chord down for 30 seconds. Just count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way up to 30. And then once you do that, you're going to let go. Count for another 30 seconds while your left hand rests. And then you're going to do it again. Hold for another 30 seconds. And then let go. Rest for 30 seconds. Do it again, one last time. Hold for 30 seconds. Let go. And once you do that, then you go back and reapply the transition to the arpeggio. And so right then and there, we did it again. We micro jumped. We were struggling with one specific chord, so we're going to look at that one specific chord. By this point, chunk number 1 should feel clean, relaxed, and controlled. And so you're going to move on to chunk number 2. So for this example, let's say it's the next 2 chords or the next 2 measures, the D sharp diminished and the E minor with a G in the bass. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to isolate the right hand, isolate the left, put them together, and get them to a point where they're also controlled and relaxed. But then you stop, because here is where almost everybody starts to make a mistake, and that is skipping straight to chunk number 3. Because what you're supposed to do is actually practice the transition from chunk number 1 to chunk number 2. Because if not, then you are just practicing isolated bits of music. And if you don't practice that transition, then your brain isn't going to associate the music as one whole piece. And so for us, we're going to practice transitioning from the E minor to that D sharp diminished. And this almost becomes like chunk 1.5, right? We're going to practice, and you're going to do the same thing. Practice the transition. Play just the chord, just D sharp diminished, back to E minor, back to D sharp diminished, back to E minor, etc. And you're going to do that for 3 to 5 minutes. Keep practicing the arpeggio. Just keep that on repeat. Once you feel comfortable, then you're going to practice from the beginning, from that very first E minor chord. You're going to play the next chord, F sharp diminished, practice the transition there, back to E minor, and then you're going to practice that transition. And once you have that, then you can move on. Then you move on to chunk number 3. And then chunk number 3, you practice the transition from number 2 to number 3, etc., slowly building up the music until you have the piece in its entirety. And this sounds like it's a lot of work, because it is, but it's also quality over quantity. If you take your time to do it right the first time, you're going to save yourself so much time in the long run that I can't tell you how many hours I've saved by doing this process. Because it feels tedious at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually really fun. You really get to absorb what your right hand's doing, what your left hand is doing, how they interact, because you're playing everything so slowly, you're zooming into everything at such a microscopic level. It's actually pretty cool. Out today, do me a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Hit the notification bell so that you get notified next time I upload a video. It really does make a huge difference for a small channel like mine, so I appreciate all the support. If you want to keep growing in your playing, just join the family, stick around for more videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in our next lesson.